The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and old coffee, a scent that clung to the pale green walls like a stubborn memory. Harold Jenkins, 78, shuffled through the automatic doors of St. Mary's Medical Center, his worn corduroy jacket brushing against his thin frame. His boots, scuffed from years of trudging through Minnesota snow, squeaked faintly on the polished floor. It was Thursday, 3:00 p.m., just like every Thursday for the past 6 months. The nurses at the reception desk gave him a familiar nod, their smiles warm but curious as he made his way to the third-floor oncology ward. Harold's face, lined with creases like a well-read book, carried a quiet wide eyes, red-rimmed, shoulders hunched, a man carrying a storm no one could see. He clutched a small paper bag in his trembling hands, the kind you'd get at a corner store, crinkled and soft from reuse. Inside, something rattled faintly, a secret he hadn't shared. Not yet. The elevator dinged, and as the doors slid open, Harold's breath hitched. He stepped out, his heart pounding, not from the walk but from the memory of her Ellen, his wife of 52 years, who used to lie in room 312, her laughter fading like a song he could no longer hear. Today, like every Thursday, he wasn't here for a checkup or a prescription. He was here for something else, something no one understood, and it was breaking him. Harold's routine had become a quiet mystery at St. Mary's. The nurses whispered about him sometimes, their voices soft over styrofoam cups of diner coffee in the break room. "He's here again," they'd say, glancing at the clock. "Always with that bag." Harold never stayed long, just long enough to sit in the waiting area, his eyes fixed on the door to room 312, now occupied by someone new. He'd linger for an hour, maybe 2, then leave without a word, his boots squeaking back down the corridor. Nurse Clara Thompson, a 32-year-old single mother with a gentle smile and tired eyes, had noticed him first. She'd been working the oncology ward for 3 years, long enough to recognize grief's many faces. But Harold's was different. It wasn't loud or raw like the families who sobbed in the hallways. His was a silent ache, a weight that seemed to grow heavier each week. Clara had tried talking to him once or twice, small talk about the weather, the snow piling up outside, but Harold only nodded, his lips pressed tight as if words might unravel him. She didn't push. Not until today. It was a bitter February afternoon, the kind where the Minnesota wind howled like a lonely dog, rattling the hospital windows. Clara was finishing her rounds when she saw Harold in his usual spot, the paper bag resting on his lap. His hands, knotted with arthritis, gripped it tightly, and his eyes gray as the winter sky stared at the floor. Something about him looked different today, more fragile, like a leaf clinging to a branch before the wind took it. Clara hesitated, her clipboard pressed against her chest. She'd seen too many people lost in their pain, too many hearts left to wander alone. She couldn't let him sit there, not again, not without trying. She walked over, her sneakers soft against the tiles, and crouched beside him. "Mr. Jenkins," she said gently, her voice warm like a hearth fire. "You come here every week. Same time, same chair. Can I ask why?" Her words hung in the air, soft but heavy, like snowflakes before a storm. Harold's hands tightened on the bag, and for a moment, Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then he looked up, his eyes meeting hers, and the rawness in them stole her breath. "It's for Ellen," he whispered, his voice cracking like thin ice. "It's always been for her." Clara sat down beside him, her heart thudding. She didn't know Ellen's story, not fully, but she'd heard fragments from the older nurses. Ellen Jenkins had been a patient here, battling breast cancer that had spread too far, too fast. She'd passed 6 months ago, right before Harold started his weekly visits. Clara waited, giving him space, her hand resting lightly on the arm of his chair. Harold's gaze drifted to the paper bag, and he opened it slowly, revealing a small stack of envelopes, yellowed at the edges, tied with a faded red ribbon. "These are her letters," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She wrote them to me when we were young, when I was stationed in Korea. I was gone 2 years, and she wrote every week, never missed one." He paused, his fingers brushing the ribbon, trembling. "She kept them all in a box under our bed. After she got sick, she'd ask me to read them to her, here, in that room. He nodded toward room 312, his eyes glistening. It was the only thing that made her smile, even when the pain was too much. Clara's throat tightened. She thought of her own life rushing between shifts, picking up her son, Liam, from daycare, barely keeping the fridge stocked. She knew what it was to hold on to small things, like the crayon drawings Liam tucked into her purse, little anchors in a stormy world. She reached out, her hand hovering, then gently touched Harold's arm. "That's beautiful, Mr. Jenkins," she said softly. "But why do you bring them here every week?" Harold's lips quivered, and he looked down at the bag, his voice breaking. "Because I promised her," he said. "She made me promise to keep reading them, to keep her close. But I can't do it at home. It's too quiet there, too empty. Here, I feel her. I sit here and I read, and it's like she's still with me." A tear slipped down his cheek, catching in the lines of his face. "I know it's foolish. She's gone, but I can't stop. I don't know how." Clara's eyes burned, but she blinked the tears back, her hand still on his arm. She thought of her own Gloucestershire father, who'd passed when she was 19, the way she still kept his old fishing hat on her dresser. Grief was a language she understood, but Harold's was deeper, carved into his bones. She glanced at the bag, the letters, the weight of a love that refused to fade. "It's not foolish," she said, her voice steady but soft, like a lullaby. "It's love. And love, it doesn't stop, does it? Not even when they're gone." Harold looked at her, his eyes searching, as if her words had reached a place he'd kept locked. For the first time, he smiled, a small, hesitant thing, like a crack of light through a boarded window. "No," he whispered, "it doesn't." Over the next few weeks, Clara made a point to check on Harold. She'd bring him a cup of hospital coffee week, but warm and sit with him when her shift allowed. They talked, slowly at first, about small things. The way the snow piled up on the hospital's old oak tree, the Thanksgiving dinners Ellen used to make, with her famous pecan pie that Harold swore could win a county fair. Clara shared stories too about Liam, who'd just turned 6 and loved drawing dinosaurs, about the way she'd sing him to sleep when the world felt too big. Harold listened, his eyes softening, and sometimes he'd chuckle, a low, rusty sound that made Clara's heart lift. One Thursday, she brought a thermos of homemade hot chocolate, the kind her mom used to make, and poured him a cup. "Ellen would have liked you," Harold said, taking a sip, his hand steadier than usual. "She always said kindness is like a seed. Plant it, and it grows." Clara smiled, her cheeks warming. "I think she planted a lot of those seeds in you," she said, and Harold's eyes glistened, but he didn't look away. Their bond grew quietly, like a fire built stick by stick. Clara started looking forward to Thursdays, to the way Harold's face lit up when she sat down, to the stories he shared about Ellen, her love for gardening, the way she'd hum old hymns while washing dishes. One day, he handed Clara a letter from the stack, his fingers hesitant. "Read this one," he said, his voice thick. "It's from when I was scared, thought I wouldn't make it back from Korea. She wrote this to keep me going." Clara unfolded the paper, the ink faded but clear, and read aloud. "My dearest Harold, don't you dare give up on me. I'm waiting for you, always. We'll have our porch swing, our little house, our life. Just come home." Her voice wavered, and when she looked up, Harold was crying silently, his hands folded in his lap. "She kept me alive," he said, "and now I don't know how to live without her." That moment shifted something in Clara. She saw Harold not just as a patient's widower, but as a man carrying a love so big it threatened to crush him. She thought of Liam, of the nights she felt too tired to go on, and how a single hug from him could pull her back. She wanted to give Harold something, anything, to ease that weight. The next Thursday, she brought a small notebook, its cover a soft blue like the Minnesota sky in spring. "Mr. Jenkins," she said, handing it to him, "maybe you could write to her, not the old letters, new ones. Tell her what you're feeling, what you see. Keep her close that way." Harold stared at the notebook, his fingers tracing the cover, and for a moment, he looked lost. Then he nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll try." The climax came a month later, on a Thursday when the snow had melted into slush, and the hospital felt brighter, as if the world was waking up. Harold arrived with his usual bag, but this time he carried the blue notebook too. Clara was at the desk, sorting charts when he approached. Something different in his step-a-lightness, like a man who'd set down a heavy load. "Clara," he said, his voice stronger than she'd ever heard it. "I wrote to her, like you said, and I want you to read one." He opened the notebook, his hand steady, and handed it to her. The page was filled with his shaky handwriting, words poured out like a river breaking free. "Ellen, my love, I miss you every day, but I'm trying. I met someone kind here, a nurse named Clara. She reminds me of you, strong, gentle, always giving. I think you'd want me to keep going, to find a reason to smile. I'm trying for you." Clara's eyes welled up as she read, her voice catching when she tried to speak. "Mr. Jenkins, this is beautiful," she managed, her hand resting on his. He smiled, a real smile, one that reached his eyes. "You gave me a way to keep her with me," he said. "Not just in the past, but now. Thank you." That day, something shifted in the oncology ward. The other nurses noticed it too, the way Harold's shoulders weren't so hunched, the way Clara's smile lingered a little longer. Harold still came every Thursday, but now he'd sit with the notebook, writing to Ellen, his pen moving slowly but surely. Clara would join him when she could, sharing stories of Liam's latest dinosaur obsession or the way the hospital's Christmas lights reminded her of her dad. They became a quiet team, two souls tethered by kindness, by the small act of listening, of showing up. Harold started bringing little things for Clara, a pack of her favorite peppermint gum, a bookmark with a pressed flower, like Ellen used to make, he'd say. And Clara, in turn, kept the thermos of hot chocolate coming, a small ritual that felt like home. As spring bloomed, Harold's visits changed. He didn't just sit by room 312 anymore. He'd walk the ward, chatting with other patients, sharing stories of Ellen's pecan pie or the way she danced to Sinatra in their kitchen. His grief was still there, a shadow that would never fully leave, but it was softer now, woven with hope. One Thursday, he brought Clara a small wooden box carved with a simple Daisy Ellen's favorite flower. Inside was a note in his shaky script. "For Clara, who gave me a reason to keep going. Ellen would have loved you." Clara hugged him, her tears soaking into his corduroy jacket, and for the first time, she felt like she'd done something that mattered. Something that reached beyond the charts and the beeping monitors. The story of Harold and Clara spread quietly through St. Mary's, a reminder that kindness doesn't need to be grand to change a life. A cup of coffee, a notebook, a moment of listening, these were the seeds Ellen had spoken of, growing into something beautiful. Harold still carried his paper bag, still read Ellen's letters, but now he carried the notebook too, a bridge between the past and the present. And Clara, who'd once thought her job was just about bandages and charts, found herself looking for the Harolds in her ward, quiet ones, the ones who needed a hand to hold. Life is heavy, isn't it? We all carry something, a loss, a fear, a heart that feels too full or too empty. But in a small-town hospital, in the middle of a Minnesota winter, a nurse and an old man reminded us that kindness can be a light in the dark. It's not about fixing everything, it's about showing up, about seeing someone's pain and saying, "You're not alone." So, what's the kindest thing you've ever experienced? Maybe it was a stranger's smile, a warm meal, or a letter that kept you going. Share it in the comments below. Let's spread those seeds of kindness together. Disclaimer: this story is a fictional or dramatized narrative created for emotional inspiration and entertainment. While it reflects real human emotions, all characters, names, and events are fictional or modified for storytelling purposes. Some parts may use AI-generated voiceovers or scripts. This content fully complies with YouTube's community guidelines and monetization policies. Our goal is to inspire, not to mislead.